Hi, I'm Jenna.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome to Heart, a conversation from Like Family, where we explore the personal realities that don't always get airtime. Stories of strength, struggle, stigma, and self-discovery. We're here to have conversations that challenge assumptions, shift perspectives, and remind us that at our core, we're all humans, simply navigating life and learning as we go. So this is our very first episode.
Boy.
I know. We always joked about having a podcast, and now here we are. But for the very first episode, we're really kind of turning the mics inwards and looking at our story. And over the last 9 years, we've really spoken about we always do it really quick, a really quick story about what happened with your parents and why we started Like Family. But today, I thought we could go a little bit deeper and really kind of talk about all of the little things and the hard things along with that journey. We met when we were 22. Can you tell us more about what your life was like back then before your parents got sick?
We were 22. I can't believe it. Did you even know what Erasmus was when we met?
No.
No idea.
Barely.
And that was, what a time of our lives. 22, we met in Europe, in Belgium. Erasmus student, what is that, an association?
Yeah, it's a student club.
Student club, yeah.
But it was more that we lived in the same building.
House, yeah.
In the same share house.
With 17 or 19 other Europeans.
Yeah, that was crazy.
It was fun. Fun times, yeah. And the only thing we were really concerned about was doing well at university. Well, I think so.
Getting through university.
I'm speaking for myself. Getting through university. Yeah, so we met in Belgium and we graduated from university shortly after that. That was the last semester of our uni degree. Or I think we had one semester left before graduating. So after our exchange where we met, I went back to Canada to finish my degree and made the decision to move to Australia to be closer to you. Yeah, I was so excited to be in Australia. I mean, just being away from the snow and the harsh winter of Canada and just to be in a country where the ocean is so accessible and it's summer 12 months a year and to be with you was pretty incredible. And I was so committed to wanting to succeed in Australia and finding employment. I didn't know what I wanted to do as a career. My journey at university was very much about following my passions, and my passions was at the time playing sports, which got me a scholarship, but I never really thought about the career. So finding a work at the time in 2010, I found work with Commonwealth Bank.
You loved that job. You were so excited about it.
Yeah.
It was a customer service role.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing fancy for a lot of people, but I was incredibly grateful for it. I still have the first contract from that job. $47,000 was my base salary.
Pretty good. Back then.
I was okay with it because in my mind I knew
15 years ago.
Yeah, I was committed to making my way up the ladder, just getting a foot in the door. For me, just the fact that I was employed by a big bank in Australia, for me that was already like a sign of success. I was telling my parents, "You won't believe this. I'm working for a big bank, and how much you pay? Don't worry about how much I'm paid. Like that doesn't matter. I work for a big bank." So for me, that was really important. First 5 years of employment at Commonwealth Bank, I went from that entry role to a leadership role within the company.
But you loved that role so much that when I said, let's take 6 months off and go traveling before I start my grad job, you were like, there's no way.
Yeah, you're the risk taker.
I'm the risk taker. I believe it was my dad that had to convince you to go traveling with me and have fun.
Yeah. And that's why I love being with you, because you kind of make me take risks that I wouldn't take. It's funny that your dad convinced us, but he's probably the most afraid of risk.
And how things have changed.
Yeah.
Any regrets?
No, absolutely not. Going on that trip was an incredible experience. We've learned and saw so many things. I think for both of us, we were very committed to our careers. We were talking a lot about it.
Wanted to be corporate big dogs.
Corporate big
I believe
dogs.
is the phrase we used a lot.
Exactly. Yeah, we use that a lot. But whilst we were in corporate, we were also thinking about what are some side hustles, what are some other things we can do with our time. We got into fitness a lot.
We did. We really got into fitness.
Yeah.
So that was life before being a primary carer. Tell us about your relationship with your parents, because it was just you and your mum and dad.
Yeah, so I grew up an only child, and so I became really close with my parents. As you know, my parents took me everywhere, and from all the trips we took growing up, it was me in the background. It was my parents living life to their fullest as the primary objective for them, and then I was in the background with them, being there.
What was the nickname that you had for them?
Salt and pepper, because there's a massive age gap between my parents. So there's a 20 years difference. And my dad he says he had white hair from the age of 20, which I doubt, but that's what he says.
Well, it's black and white photos, so we wouldn't know. Really?
Well, hey, touche. He'd appreciate that joke. Yeah, very close relationship with my parents. I'm part of my dad's second marriage. So there's a part of my dad's life that I heard of and heard stories about, but it's not the same person that raised my half brother, if in a way. So I learned a different side of my dad. I love him to pieces, but yeah, I guess we're kind of an extension or a new family that he started. From my experience, it was a very nice upbringing, very loving parents and caring parents. Yeah. So when I moved to Australia, it was a big change for them. And my mom came to visit in 2011. Remember that?
That was awesome.
That was fun.
Took our moms on a trip.
Yep. We went to Melbourne. And then she went back. And then I learned about their temporary separation. I don't know if you remember that, in 2011 when I was here. So that was a bit strange. Took me a bit of time to comprehend what was happening there. But then we also know that my dad was diagnosed with, they found a black spot on his lungs. And that kind of brought my parents a bit closer together at the time where they were separated. And that eventuated into something a little bit worse for my dad, where eventually it was diagnosed as lung cancer.
It was hard, but I feel like at that stage, it wasn't something that was really life-changing, because your mum was there as his kind of main person to lean on.
She's a rock. My mom was caring for him, but before caring for him, she was caring for her brother who's living with mental health challenges, her mom, her uncle. She was such a rock for the family.
And how would you describe your relationship with your mum?
My bestie. Mammy, I know parents and friends are different things, but yeah, very close relationship for, I'm definitely a mama's boy.
No shame in that?
No shame at all, no. I think that she showed me a lot about, she taught me a lot of things about life and that I carry today. So the communication between me and my mom were a lot more regular and frequent than I had with my dad, let's say. But also my mom was across everything.
And you've told me before about how the relationship with your mum is different than to your dad, because he was an older dad. So for you, it's like a subconscious thing that you've had in your mind about how you've been super close to your mum because you always knew that your dad was older.
It was a weird feeling because I remember in primary school, I don't know how that came up in class, but someone asked a question like, how old are your parents? And then everyone said the age of their parents. And then I said my dad's age. And I remember there was a reaction from the other students. I was like, well, I didn't even know that was necessary. They made me feel bad about it, that he was that old. And so from that, I can pinpoint that time, that exact day that happened, because it carried with me for the rest of my life that I always had an older dad. He never prioritizes health. So subconsciously, I don't know, I think it was a protection, a response to protecting my emotions by accepting that he won't be around for that long.
That's a really hard thing for a young kid to have to think about. So when did you become a primary carer?
Yeah, Dad was diagnosed with lung cancer, and 6 months later, you and I were staying in our apartment in Ultimo, and we got a phone call, and it was from my half brother to call to say that my mom was in hospital. She had developed a vicious brain virus called herpes encephalitis, which is extremely rare. It derives from herpes, which we all have in our bodies, but not all of us develop it. Some of us develop it in the form of a cold sore around the mouth. Hers, unfortunately, developed in her brain, which caused inflammation of her brain. And at the age of 55, she lost her ability to eat, talk, and walk. So when my half-brother called, it was to tell us that she was in a coma at the hospital in Canada. And immediate reaction is why? Why is she in a coma? Was she in a car accident or something like that? And then we learned about the virus, which at the time no one really knew a lot about. Neurologists didn't really understand it. They knew of it. It's not something that's been widely researched. So there's still a lot of answers or questions to be answered. It was devastating to learn that. We had no idea when she was going to wake up from that coma. Went to Canada, and that's when I arrived, and she had just woken up. She didn't look like the mom that I know. She had lost a tremendous amount of weight for being in a coma for 3 weeks. She also couldn't recognize anyone. She couldn't speak. She couldn't stand up. So it's like you're happy she's alive, but you also her personality, the personality of the person you know so well is gone.
And one of the hardest things about that was when they told us that she was sick, your first reaction was like, I'm getting on a plane, I'm coming there right now. But they said, no, don't come because she'll be in a coma for a few more weeks.
Yeah.
And you're better off waiting until she's out of her coma and she's going to go back home before you come and spend time because it might be a few months to put her through recovery. How did you manage those months before going to see her, knowing that she was in hospital?
I don't think at that time the reality had completely synced in. And it was, at that time, a lot of it was based on the information that I knew. What I knew back then was that she was in a coma, but no one had no idea about what she was going to be like when she wakes up. My dad and my half-brother were the ones who, and the medical staff at the hospital are the ones who gave me reassurance that all you're going to do if you come now is be sitting by her bedside. Just wait a few more weeks. So in all, we got the news in November 2012, and I ended up going there at December 2012. So it was only 4 weeks. But I think the reassurance of the medical staff and the close family to, you don't need to come now. It's not going to benefit anything. So.
And how did the relationship with your dad evolve or change? Because you guys had been so used to your mum kind of doing everything for you guys and having that real shift in the family dynamics.
Whenever I tell my relationship with my dad, a lot of people resonate with it. Look, he was born in 1938. He has certain values and beliefs that he strongly believes in. And he's a very proud person, like all of us. And I don't think he ever expected me to all of a sudden have to take charge of things. But when I arrived there, and clearly my dad wasn't aware or across the financials, I could also tell that my dad was emotionally coping with it in his own way. Like he was trying to distract himself a lot. So they had a beautiful house, and my dad was basically renovating parts of the house that didn't need renovation.
I remember that. He moved the stairs. I didn't even know that was possible to move stairs.
Yeah. So stairs leading down to the basement. He decided we're going to switch the orientation of the stairs. We're going to turn that around.
Yeah. So your 75-year-old dad was home by himself, renovating the entire house.
Middle of the night.
And he had lung cancer.
He was doing chemotherapy at the same time, at the same hospital. So he was on level 1 of that same little hospital. And on level 1, he's getting chemotherapy. And on level 4, my mom's in the mental health department, or mental health. I don't want to say, kind of like
rehab.
A ward. Mental health rehab section of the hospital. So for me, it was trips to the hospital daily. And on the days where my dad had his treatments, drop him off on level 1, go visit my mom on level 4. But during that time, my dad was dealing with stress differently than I was.
How did you manage your own stress plus your dad's through this period?
This comes from my mom again, just the relationship I had with my mom. She was, a former aerobics instructor. She always taught me about exercise is good for your brain. So I just kept exercising as well during that time. So I was working, exercising, and just taking care of my parents. So whenever my dad would nap, that was kind of my alone time.
Can you tell us a bit about how her transition from hospital to home went?
Yeah, so she was in that hospital for 3 months following the coma. And the neurologist said, I think it's in our best interest to move your mom back to her house. And at the time, my reaction was surprise, frustrated. I said, why would I send my mom back to the house? There's no support. I've never cared for someone in this way. Here she's surrounded by the best staff, the best qualified staff. There's everything she needs here. And what he said is what it really changed my life and our life, I guess, is that we don't know much about encephalitis, but what we do know is the brain has this amazing ability to rebuild itself. And he was referring to sort of neuroplasticity. And one thing we know that stimulates the brain is when you're surrounded by senses that you recognize, so whether it's smell, touch, hearing, seeing. And so what he was describing was essentially a social support plan. And he said, I'll help you with this program. We'll put it together. And essentially what it meant is we'll go home, we'll assess the home and ensure you've got what you need in place. So a bit like what an occupational therapist would do, looking at the bathroom, looking at the stairs, looking at the safety requirements in the house. But what we're going to put in place is a plan for people that she knows or acquaintances to come and visit her and to come and provide her that social support that can stimulate her brain. And the idea here is that the brain will find pathways to repair itself.
How did the plan actually go? And when it didn't go to plan, tell us how it didn't go to plan and how you dealt with that.
So what I underestimated when we brought my mom back, at this stage, she is standing and able to walk by herself. Mm-hmm. That's the only progression since waking up from her coma. So
what about her memory? Because when she woke up, she couldn't remember anyone or anything. How was her memory when she got home?
We still couldn't tell because she couldn't communicate effectively. She couldn't communicate at all. She couldn't talk. What we had underestimated was the profound psychological damage that was done, where her brain went through these phases where I would bring her home, and this is middle of winter, so there's lots and lots of snow for anyone who's been to my part of the world. Lots of snow in the middle of winter. And we get home, and I didn't realize this, but my mom went through this psychotic episode where she thought home was the hospital and she would try to run away. She was to a point where, she didn't know didn't matter what she was wearing or what temperature was outside. She'd just try and run away. So there's many times where I'm preparing meal for my parents, and then I turn around. I remember the first time the door was open. I go to my dad, he goes, "Why is the door open?" My dad says, "I don't know." And then about 100 feet away, like my mom's in the middle of a snowbank, and I had to go get her and basically physically bring her back into the house. Not something you expect to be doing, especially when you had medical professionals telling you it was okay to go back home. So then we said, okay, well then we need to put a lock on the door so she can't exit. Well, then the problem became that's a fire hazard. Now, what do you do in case of a fire? You can't do that. So I couldn't put a lock on the door. So so that became not just a challenging task, but incredibly emotionally challenging.
And I guess there's been so much progress since then. So how have you managed to kind of go from that stage to the progress you saw where, she was definitely recognizing you guys. She wasn't trying to run away. And how did you get there?
Yeah, it took until September 2015. September 2015 is when we started seeing, so this is 11 months after her coma. And we started seeing signs of the memory and her speech coming back. The speech was good enough in September 2015 that you could have a reasonable conversation with her. I remember going for walks with her because it's autumn, so the leaves are all colorful, and we go for walks in the woods, and we'd work on the vocabulary and talking. So, yeah, that's about when things were getting better, and that's the same time where you and I decided that we moved them to Australia. Because do you remember that time you and I were both looking for jobs in Quebec? And seeing
there was a time there.
We thought maybe we need to move over there because we both had good employers in Australia. One of the things that was amazing during that period of time is having you and your family's support and seeing how close you and your family are. The one thing I'll say that put me at a bit of a disadvantage in Canada is, yes, we do have a beautiful family over there, extended family, and they care. But because of where my parents were living, and it's so spread out, it's quite far from everybody else. So it was actually, when you and I did the planning, what do? We do move to Quebec? Do we relocate them here? It all turned out net to be better off moving them here in Australia. And your family was a huge reason why.
In terms of your relationships, before your parents got sick, we were very much about having fun, living in the moment, kind of setting ourselves up for future life. How did your relationships with friends, family, people change after what happened with your parents?
I found that some friendships definitely faded away. I didn't know I was going to be a primary carer, but all of a sudden there's this switch that it's no longer about my needs. It's about someone else's needs first. So the other ambitions, like going up the corporate ladder, and any other sort of goals I had outside of work, I parked them, basically. And it all became parents first. Nothing else really mattered at the time. What's amazing when something like that happens to us is you then realize what is really essential in your life. And I think our relationship got a lot deeper because of that.
Well, before that, we were just traveling and partying.
Yeah. we built a more meaningful relationship.
Mm.
You showed a side of your personality that I hadn't ever seen before, which made me like you even more. And same with our close friends, like the close friends that I decided to spend energy on. Not that the other friendships weren't important. It's just that there was people that were more present and helpful at the time that I needed. And I wasn't necessarily, like I said, the only times I had to myself was when my dad was napping. So unless people, made efforts, I guess those are the people I prioritize, are the people that were actually reaching out to see if I was doing okay.
The funny thing is that the ironic thing maybe through this is I think you and my mum really bonded about being primary carers because her mum was in a nursing home with Alzheimer's. But when you spoke to friends our age and you were like, this is my like huge problem as a primary caregiver. We were all 26. So everyone would be like, I don't know. But do you want to talk to my parents?
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like I, since then, have been building better relationships with people who are older than me.
Yeah, well, we've always thought that, your real sweet spot has been that kind of age group.
Hey, easy though. But it's true. Like, you don't really realize you're just doing it. You're in the act of taking care for someone. That's what's the most important thing. Like I said, you realize a lot of other things come secondary. The priority is on your loved ones. And it's not something you envision doing when you're 26 years old. Definitely not.
A lot of what we were doing back then, like I said, was about trying to build a life. But on top of the emotional burden that you took on with your parents, it was also a administrative and financial burden as well.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I remember that time where I'm at my parents' place and my dad doesn't understand how their finances are being managed. And I'm frantically looking through physical documents. And I am stressing because I don't know how much they have saved. I don't know what the situation is. So that level of uncertainty leads to, anxiety, because anxiety is not knowing what they're, what's to happen, essentially, not having control. That was incredibly stressful. I'm happy that I was able to figure it out, but I think a lot of people in that situation also wouldn't be able to know what to do. And the only reason I sort of knew what to do is because I had people like you and your mom and friends, close friends, to be able to talk to, because it's quite isolating. I think for me, I've always approached things where I don't want to burden people, so I'm just going to deal with it, and I'm just going to deal with the isolation. I'm just going to deal with the tasks. I'm just going to get on with it. But every time I've asked for help, I always find a huge relief on the back of it. But it's like my brain is wired, and I think a lot of us are wired this way. We want to show that we are capable of doing things ourselves, and we're afraid of asking for help. But every time you do ask for help and you get that support, it's a huge relief. So learning that for me was hard, but it was also, still today, right? There's things that are just hard to unwire, I think, in all of us. But that was a valuable lesson. And it was a lesson for today, in regards to leadership as well, being able to recognize that I don't have all the answers and to lean on other people and to be able to delegate things as well. Not everything has to be on me. And then the other thing I learned, secondly, is around communication. Having those difficult conversations with my dad, who refused to receive help. He couldn't walk from the living room to the kitchen without support, but he wouldn't ask for help. Being able to communicate with him that I'm here for him, but also helping him maintain his dignity, so he doesn't feel like he's a burden as well. So it's like recognizing other people's emotions and giving them that space to be able to express their emotions. That's something you learn at 26 years old that you usually learn when you're a parent or you're much older. It was so clear in every day what I did that had to happen. I have to consider my dad's emotions, because otherwise he's going to, flip out emotionally, because he's going through a lot of stress as well. I have to maintain his dignity. And then there's my mom. We don't want to talk, in front of my mom and make her feel, we don't know what she can understand at this point. So we don't want to make her feel bad.
So being a primary carer can be very consuming at times. How have you dealt with that consuming sort of, like you need to be a supporter all the time versus your like real desires to do things for yourself, to find joy for yourself, even if it isn't exactly being that supporter, that primary carer 24/7.
So my parents were only here for a year in Sydney until my dad passed away. But during that time, I remember you risk taker still asking me if I wanted to go travel. And obviously there was that big trip to India. We were into our yoga phase.
Yes, we were very into yoga. We loved it.
And that took also a lot of convincing. Because the primary focus and the attention is on what are my parents' needs? What do my parents need? And I need to be there for them. So I remember when we booked our flights, even for India and that trip to India, there was a bit of a guilty feeling because I thought that, well, I shouldn't be doing this. I should be staying here with my parents. That's my job. That's my responsibility.
Yes, but the irony about that is that our trip was cut short.
Yeah.
Because we got a phone call from your dad and...
Yeah, it was pretty rough. Not a good memory. But yeah, we were in the Himalayas of India in the north. What was that region called? Do you remember?
I've forgotten. But we were on a yoga retreat.
In an ashram.
In an ashram.
We'd
only just got there.
Yeah. And we went down. We were staying in a temple, and all of a sudden there was a bit of reception that came through and on my phone, and there was all these notifications from your parents, and my dad was in hospital. And the reason that we know that he was in hospital is because not from the notifications, because we rushed to the temple, the guru or the person that was heading that temple, and he asked for a phone, and he took us to this phone booth that looked like it was from the 1970s.
Yeah.
And it had a roll. You had to like roll it. And we called your mom, and she passed the phone to my dad, who was in intensive care. And he was heavily medicated. We said to each other, are you okay? I said, I love you. You'll be all right. I reassured him he'll be okay. And that was the last time I spoke to him. And then I found, I don't know how to this day, I found my half brother's phone number.
In your phone?
Yeah. But
How am I still emotional about this? I know the story, obviously, but it still makes me so sad. I swear
it wasn't in my phone for some reason. My memory was very clouded from back then. But I spoke to him as well, and I said, "Hey, if you want to speak to Dad, this is your chance before he goes." So I got both his sons got to speak to him before, and then we took the next flight back, and we got there 24 hours after.
We tried really hard.
We tried hard to make it back on time for him, but it was his time.
I am always in admiration that the next year we went on the same trip, not the same ashram, obviously. But like that you haven't been scarred by that. How did you leave that behind and be able to be like, no, I still want to travel. Like that's just life. Like how have you done that?
Because my dad would have wanted us to do it. I remember when we got on the plane to India, he called me and said I fell. I think I just fell on my bum. But turned out that fall is what led him to go to ICU, but we didn't realize that. But I remember when I was on the phone with him and he fell, I was like, we were literally about to board the plane, and he said, I can't get up by myself. I was like, oh, okay, let me call Jenna's parents. They'll see, they can come help you. And he said, I'll be fine. I don't want to disrupt your trip. He didn't want to disturb us. And I was super worried, but I thought everything would be fine. Unfortunately, it wasn't. But I think he would have wanted us to do it.
Everything that we did was around making sure that your parents are okay, making sure that they have what they need and that they are happy.
Yeah.
So how did you go from, like, what was the time that you were like, okay, that's doing pretty well. Like, I can do something for myself again.
When we found them a place to stay that they liked.
That they liked. Not the first place that everyone had to move up 3 flights of stairs.
With a pink bathtub that my dad told everyone about that he hated.
It was a pink bathtub, not the 3 flights of stairs.
Yeah, exactly. So my son got me an apartment with a pink bathtub. That was his primary concern. Yeah, so when we found him an apartment that they liked, there was a routine in place. There was accessibility in place. There was a bit more peace of mind for everyone. When you can go about a routine, a day-to-day, with no serious concerns, and what I mean by that is knowing that everybody, in case something happens to them, a fall, was primarily the main concern for both my parents. A fall there would be a system in place where they would be looked after without me. Once that was in place, that's when I felt, okay, I can maybe stretch a little bit and go do something crazy, like go have a little bit of fun. So that trip to India was definitely a milestone for us to be able to do that. But that was literally short-lived for the reason that we just discussed. After that, we had our wedding 3 months later. And then at the wedding, my aunties who came over had private conversations with my mom, who had disclosed that she was experiencing loneliness because she didn't know anyone except me here. And she felt like a burden to me. So I'm the primary carer. And I feel the person I'm caring for thought she was being a burden to me. So that was a surprise. When the aunties pulled us aside, if you remember, my auntie Gigi and Auntie Carolyn, they said, your mom would prefer going back to her village where she's from. She knows everyone there. She's part of a community. And that was really hard for me to accept now because for the last 3 years, I've been so controlling of their lives out of necessity.
But your mom's also the most independent person.
She is.
That we know.
Yeah. Has she regained her cognitive abilities? That part of her personality came back. So now today she's fully recovered, but she still has a few gaps in how she speaks. But that underlying personality, that independence that she has, she's always had that. We know the stories that we were told by family members where she like ran away from home when she was 14. She's fiercely independent, and that's always been her. So even to this day, and that serious brain injury, those are the kind of conversations we had to have. They were incredibly difficult conversations to have at the time because I wasn't willing to let go of her because now I had just lost my dad and she was the only thing
The funny thing about that was that we got a call saying that because they'd come over here on your dad's aged parent visa, that she couldn't stay. So we were worried that we had to tell her that she can't stay because of the visa.
Yep.
And she was worried because she didn't want to tell us that she actually wants to go home.
Yeah. I was saying how communication is important before. Yeah. So Australian government's telling us, she might need to get deported. And we're worried about telling her that. But in reality, she just wanted to go home the whole time. Yeah. So when we got to that conversation, we all go through phases in our lives. So we have to have a difficult conversation, whether it's in our personal lives or at work. Most of us had. But once you do have that difficult conversations, there's often a huge sense, again, of relief that comes from it. It's not easy, but gosh, when we had that conversation with her, we had a plan that would be in the best interest for both. And she was happy.
She said at that point that this was Jerry's dream and she wanted to make it happen for him.
Yeah.
That's why she was like, okay, well, this is his dream's done and my dream is to go back.
Also, we realized that this was necessary because the whole time I cared for my parents, and I thought about this a lot. I was always conscious about exercising because I was always conscious about my own mental and physical health. And honestly, I was probably exercising more for my mental health than my physical health. I knew that if I didn't look after myself, how could I care for someone else? And that's really important. If you can't take care of your own mental health and physical health, it's really hard to care and love for someone else. That moment where we had to have that difficult conversation with my mom and decide that she would go back to Canada, she is no longer going to be in physical or distance from us. She would have to go back to the other side of the world, giving her the ability to become independent again, letting go of that and realizing that this is going to be good for me because I can then spend time doing the things that are for myself and start being selfish again. And there's a bit of a guilt about doing that. But what we realized is that we all need to do that as it's human nature to be a little bit selfish sometimes and think about your own needs.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't feel guilt about that. For primary carers, I always say, what are you doing for yourself when you're not caring for others? Or make sure you take that time to do things that make you happy and no one else.
And I think we have a very different perspective now than we did 9 years ago because we're also parents now, whereas before we were fancy free. We're like, in our 20s. And compartmentalizing and being able to make sure that you're your best self wherever you need to be is really important.
Yeah.
So apart from working out every day, what else do you do to compartmentalize and make sure that, you can have your stress and have that in certain situations, but that you can come back to, be a dad and be less and be really present there, come to work and be present there. Like how do people, what are your suggestions for compartmentalization?
Visibility over what seems to be invisible. So many of us carry on with life, work, personal relationships, and there are things that we carry. So my example is I would continue on with my life and my work at the time, even with caring for my parents. People knew, this happened to Matt. He's caring for his parents. He must be going through a lot. I was also, if you remember, working 3 different jobs, and I didn't like to talk about it because I didn't think people would be interested. That is the stuff that primary carers go through, and they don't necessarily every primary care talk about it because I don't know. Maybe they don't. It's there could be many reasons why they don't talk about it. It could be a dignity, ego, perception. A lot of cultures don't like to show that vulnerability.
Yeah, definitely.
And so you're carrying on with your daily tasks while carrying these things, but it's invisible to others because you don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's why for me, now I understand that being looking after yourself and being selfless as a primary care is not non-negotiable.
So what would you do differently throughout this journey?
That's a hard question to answer. I think everything went as well as they could have. I probably would have spent more time in the early days when I was back in Canada caring for my parents. I would probably spend more time asking for help. I thought I could be able to do all of it by myself. It's not until we moved them to Australia, where we had your family to help, that I saw the benefits of it. It's not until later.
My family will never ask if you need help. They'll just do it.
That's right. That was very different. Yeah.
They'll just insert themselves.
Very different culture to what I was brought up in as well. So that was, an adjustment, but something that I came to having to accept. And just, there are things in life that we grow up with certain values and beliefs, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into a completely different country, different values and things like that. And I guess for me, one of the things as well is learning to appreciate the people who are offering their help. I tend to often not accept support from others, but this experience has taught me that it's okay to accept help.
Based on that, what advice would you give to other people who are primary carers, particularly people who are young carers?
Don't be afraid to talk about what you're going through with anyone. Find the people in your circle that you trust, that are going to listen. This all sounds obvious, but it's the execution of it that's really difficult. We all think we can do it and we can handle it ourselves until it's too late and the burnout cycles out of control. So I would just say to people, remember that what you're going through, not everyone sees. You can't assume that people understand what you're going through and then all of a sudden lash out emotionally because people don't empathize or don't understand what you're going through. And that's something I had to go through. Whenever I was with people who weren't grateful for their living family, I get really upset. But why am I getting upset? I'm getting upset because someone's going through their own emotions and they don't know what I've gone through. So, but I'm not going to preach and talk about what I'm going through. I'm just going to be accepting and be okay to being vulnerable. And the reason why we're talking about this subject and sharing this experience is because I think, especially my parents who were mentors in the AA movement, they are very open to sharing vulnerabilities. And that's one thing they've taught me. And if you don't share your experiences, how are people going to learn from them?
It's hard to share experiences, though. It's hard to kind of say that. And I think that a lot of people get into this habit of when you say, hey, how are you doing? And people will say, yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, well, that's this typical response.
Yeah. And then afterwards you go, actually, I'm not doing so well.
Yeah.
But do you have any tips about how to get deeper than just being like, yeah, I'm okay? How do you reach out?
Ask people about themselves. When building relationships, you should be curiously interested in the other people's lives and asking them how they're doing, asking them about, and then sort of finding out more about them. Relationship building isn't about talking just about yourself.
Yeah.
And if you genuinely care about someone else, you want to learn about them. In doing that and being genuine with someone else, you should be able to figure out if everything is actually okay.
And from a practical, administrative, financial kind of sense, what advice would you give to primary carers who just feel totally lost, kind of going through everything, dealing with powers of attorney, that sort of thing?
Definitely, for me, what helped is as a starting point, is going to the free services available in your local council or community. That was really helpful, and just getting some guidance, seeing what the options are. Today, this is very different to 15 years ago, of course. But back then, especially for a town that was in a rural area, that was the go-to place. And if that didn't work, obviously I looked for support groups online as well, using any resources I could find and having conversations. Having conversations is really important because the more information you gather, the more you can make good decisions that are going to be helpful for yourself or for your parents or the person you're caring for.
Yeah, so you can learn a lot from other people who have been through similar things.
Talk to people who have lived experience. Talk to any sort of free support out there. And then once you've collated that information, you can move on. And if you have capacity to go for private services, I know for us a big thing was, finding people who could cope with my dad's personality. So someone who was interested into music was a big plus. Someone who was a little younger for my dad was beneficial because he didn't want to be seen with someone in the community that for him, his interpretation was someone around my age would look like I'm receiving support. But that you are receiving support. But for him, it was more about perception. So finding someone who had common interest, his sense of humor was really important. We ended up finding someone great for that, to provide that social support and that companionship. And she was the only person who could get him to do his exercises, and it was fantastic.
Thanks, Matt, for being so real, getting down into the deep stuff and making me cry again over stories that I have lived through. It's this story that really led us to creating Like Family. Over the last 9 years, we've been helping people who are in really similar or sometimes very different sort of situations as primary carers. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about what we do?
Yeah, well, I remember when we thought of our problem and we thought this problem, surely other people are experiencing it. And turns out after we did some research that, the main problem we were experiencing, we described it as loneliness. And loneliness that was experienced both by my parents and by us as primary carers as well, because not a lot of people in our circle had a shared experience like this one. So, the issue of loneliness is massive. We see now a lot of research from World Health Organization showing it as a global pandemic. It's as bad as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So there's something to say in that, and I don't think that research should be undervalued. It should be recognized. And when we started Like Family, we said, okay, how do we address the issue of finding support for my parents? Accessible support that's personalized, support that's flexible to our needs. And what we were finding at the time was just, a long list of pricing at different times of day, expensive, not a lot of flexibility. It had to be at a certain time when someone was available. So it made things very difficult for us. So knowing that we would try and create this model and see if other people resonated with it. And when we launched it, it was so refreshing to be able to speak to people who were primary carers, because those were the early adopters who contacted us. And we told them about the problem we were solving, and they resonated with it. And I remember that being so refreshing that we had found other people that were facing the same problem as us, and we are able to help them.
So if this story resonates with you, please go to likefamily.com.au and check us out.